Hello and welcome to Debut Spotlight. I'm Rachel Barenbaum, author of the brand new novel Atomic Anna, and I'm super excited to have Courtney Maum on my show this morning. She is absolutely amazing and already dancing. I love her. I have to tell you that I met Courtney back in 2019. I was living abroad and I did my very first US book tour event with her, and I was so terrified, and it was in a bar in Rhode Island. And she just looked at me and she took my hand and she said, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." And I've loved her ever since. So, Courtney, I don't know if you remember that moment.
Oh, Rachel, how could I forget? I remember that was a little bit of a tough event because there were many people in that bar that didn't want to be there for our reading. Do you remember they were like
That's
at
right.
the actual bar and we were sort of reading, and there was definitely a vibe of I kind of just want to drink my beer. Like, who are these maniacs up there with the microphone?
Reading.
It was, and you were like, is it always going to be like this? I said, you probably 8 times out of 10, yeah.
Oh my God. But you were just so steady and strong. And thank you. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're
Oh my
welcome.
God. Amazing.
Anytime.
So, for people who don't know Courtney, I'm going to read a short bio. She is unbelievable. You need to buy all of her books. Courtney is the author of the novels Costa Allegra, Touch, and I Am Having So Much Fun Here Without You, and a guide for writers before and after the book deal. By the way, I have recommended that book to writers about 1,000 times.
Thank
If you
you.
are a writer, aspiring writer, go out and get that. I'm going to say the title one more time: Before and After the Book Deal. Her writing and essays have been widely published in such outlets as the New York Times, O, the Oprah Magazine, BuzzFeed, and Modern Loss. She lives in Litchfield County, Connecticut, where she founded the learning collaborative, The Cabins. They are incredible. And she's recently published a whole string of personal essays on her tour of duty, as she calls it,
Mhm.
in a number of amazing outlets, including The Guardian and more. Courtney, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's such a
Um,
night. It's always such a pleasure to see you. And oh yes, here we are.
Here we are.
I
Here's
am
the
speaking to
beauty.
you live from horse country. I am in Versailles, Kentucky, which is right next to Lexington, Kentucky, which, we are in Derby land. And in fact, Versailles is where Rich Strike, the Derby winner, was trained. And I think he's out there somewhere. But so hello, Rich Strike. Good job, buddy.
Hello. So you are here today to talk about your debut memoir, as we said, The
Yeah.
Year of the Horses. It is so beautiful. I love the cover. I love the book. Can you tell us, what is it about?
Sure, I think I can. I think I can. Yeah,
You can do
it's
that.
So the year of the horses is, I cheated a little bit. It's the year and a half of the horses, and it takes place right before I turn 40 years old, and my just absolutely started to unravel. And it's about how returning to a childhood passion of mine, which was horses in my case, and learning polo, which was a wild thing to do as a fearful mom, brought me back to a lost sense of self and restored my access to joy and pleasure and goofiness and all of these things that had sort of been pulled out of me by America, I think. Yeah. And it's let's see, what we call I think a hybrid memoir or a braided memoir. It has a lot of reported research on the sort of privileged relationship between women and horses and men's attempt to tame both parties over time.
Very timely, right? As we
Yes,
talk about
yep.
Roe versus Wade and what
Thanks,
may
men.
be
Yeah.
falling, right? So it is a serious and heavy read, but also I thought very important and very strongly feminist. And I loved in the very beginning, you said, you used the term that your check engine light had come on.
It did.
And yeah, and I loved that expression, but that you said you didn't feel that you could claim it because on the outside, your life looked, beautiful. You had many things, you were very privileged. And so you didn't feel that you could check the engine, right?
Yeah, I
You
mean, I
talked
felt
about
like,
that.
okay, it's okay to have a check engine light, but I just can't go to the mechanic. Like I kind of
Yeah.
have to just deal with it because, you know, I'm a woman, fine, but I'm white. I grew up very, very fortunate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Great education. And then, of course, I realized my lifelong dream of becoming a writer. And I think having, I guess, the courage or perhaps the foolishness, I don't know which it is, to come out and say like, wow, even when you realize your dream and you've reached a certain level of success, sometimes it's really hard actually to have realized a dream, because then what happens is, in my case, when I became an author after wanting to be a writer for probably 30 years, all of a sudden your dream becomes your job, and your relationship to your passion, it just necessarily has to change. And with Before and After the Book Deal, that's something I just wanted to come out and talk about, and have other people within the industry talk about what happens when the passion of your entire life becomes a job, and all of a sudden your writing is meant to make money for you. And that's something that started to lead to my unraveling in the book, is that my writing, I was about to miss a book deadline. And I just, the thing is, I've been like very type A, super self-sufficient person, and had been sort of lauded and applauded for being that way for such a long time, and had many people, including colleagues, my husband, relatives, my literary agent, a lot of people just thought of me as like, oh, she always gets her done. She'll always rise to the occasion. Oh, despite the fact she has chronic insomnia and never sleeps, like she'll always just kind of nail it. And I had not arranged my life in such a way where there was time in the calendar for me to break down. But it was actually my body, I think, that just started to come apart before I could acknowledge it in my mind,
Yeah. So I think I don't want to skirt around, because you are very forthright in the book. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us, like, what does that mean that you broke down?
I actually think it's interesting to talk about the physical ramifications, because depression, I think we think about it cerebrally so often. But for me, I mean, I've struggled with chronic insomnia, unfortunately, since I was like prepubescent. So it started with an absolute inability to sleep, even with sleeping medication. So
and you were trying everything.
I was trying everything,
like
and I had
drugs, alcohol,
talk therapy, acupuncture, and even talk therapy and serious sleeping medications. But I just reached a level of insomnia. It really was like a runaway racehorse. Even the pills, I could not sleep. It was like I was making myself break down, maybe to signal to others. And then I dropped. Probably I was at like 119 pounds, which is probably 19 pounds less than I am now. So not a healthy weight for me. I developed irritable bowel syndrome. I couldn't keep anything in. I couldn't really digest food. I started getting debilitating canker sores like all the time. So speaking became horrendously painful. I mean, there's other things, but it was no picnic. And through all that, I had a toddler. I was touring with my husband for a film that we'd written together. And this was no small thing. I mean, it went to Sundance. And then I also was touring for my first book and was under contract for a second book that I only had a year to write. And I was working in marketing and advertising. I was the only breadwinner in my entire family. So, and breastfeeding, all the stuff, right?
So keep adding on.
Among, social planning and cooking the dinners, it just, and fell apart. Yeah. And the insomnia was the first manifestation. And then it was just this debilitating depression, which I've certainly had sadness in my life before, but writing had always been kind of my safe house, my way out, my plug to recharge myself. And it just wasn't working anymore. It literally was like the current wasn't there, and I could not recharge from my writing. The writing itself was a source of the sadness for the first time, and it was pretty yucky.
Yeah. So one of the things that really struck me is that you also struggled with anorexia when you were younger, eating. So you mentioned now that you were 20 pounds lighter, right, than you are now. And, as a child too. And that with the anorexia as a child and now, right, as an adult, like you're literally falling apart in front of people and no one is saying anything.
No one said anything. Well, one person said something. And the other day he was like, I'd like you to mention me by name. So I'm going to. It was Matt Summel, who author of Making Nice, who has a bad boy reputation, but is actually one of the sweetest people I know. He is the only person in my friend group. I mentioned him in the book. He pulled
Yeah,
me
you
aside at an AWP and he said, "What the hell is wrong with you? You look like shit. Like, you look absolutely awful." The only person, you know, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot because, you know, in many ways, no, you shouldn't be allowed to comment on people's bodies, right?
mhm.
That's not great. But at the same time, here we are, wherever we are in the pandemic. I don't want to say post pandemic, but we're stepping out and we're seeing people who maybe look like they're having a hard time. Maybe they gained a lot of weight, lost a lot of weight, look bloated, are clearly having trouble with alcohol, right? Well, whatever it
Right,
is. Um,
right.
what do it's very hard to tell. Is there a window open through which I can sneak in and offer help or say something? Or does this
Right.
person want to pretend that they're passing? Because there were moments in my life where, you know, especially if I was doing something professional, I wanted to pass as a healthy person, you know, as someone who
Mhm.
was well in the head and sort of succeeding. And I wanted to pretend that I didn't look as awful and gaunt as I looked to myself in the mirror. But then, you
Mhm.
know, with Matt's comment made me realize, oh my God, I'm not passing. And in fact, everybody knows and nobody's saying anything to me, which made me feel even more alone, unfortunately, you know?
Yeah. But thank goodness he did say something. But for people who are listening who haven't read the book yet, the power of this memoir comes in the way that you describe these moments. And for me, the one that stuck out the most was really when you were a child and you went away for the summer, right? And that's when you started swimming 100 laps, right? And counting your calories, right? And you come back
Yeah.
super thin. Nobody says anything, but then the principal of your school
Oh,
calls you in, and she's a mother that you know well because you used to be good friends with her daughter. And she's the only one that says something, right? But then she's in
oh,
this position of
that's
power. She's the principal. But you described that so beautifully that was the moment that I felt like Courtney has opened up, right? Taken down everything and let me into her life.
Oh yeah, that scene is for me maybe the hardest in the book because the principal in question was principal of the head of middle school, and her daughter Kristen was my absolute best friend growing up until
Mhm.
maybe I was 8 or 9. At which point I just flat out like ditched her for the popular girls because we were kind of the nerdy artistic girls, and I mean it might actually be the number one regret of my life. And it was, I just thank God
I
we've
just got
talked a
the
lot.
goosebumps, by the
Yeah,
way.
we've talked tons since then. And she sent me, I mean, I don't want to, it's her letter that she sent to me, but after, because I gave her the book really early and, you know, I will love her for the rest of my life and I need her back. And it was just the first mistake of my life. And so when her mom called me into the office, her mom was like a second mom to me, you know, and
Mhm.
she didn't confront me about why I ditched her daughter, you know, but she was
Right.
confronting me about all this
But you
weight
were
I
so scared
lost.
that she would. That's what
I
you were,
was
right?
so well.
You had that
But I also
guilt.
think I wanted her to because no one was calling me out on that either. And it was another noticeable thing in my life. Like I've left my best friend for this gaggle of you know popular girls, and nobody's going to call me out on it. Not my parents. No one's going to be like, "Where's Kristen?" And you know that even though I was the one who was doing the hurting, yeah, it was so painful. You know, it just showed me where the real love lied, and I turned away from it. And that I just thought, well, you know, this needs to be on paper. I mean, there's a lot of moments in the book where I just expose parts of myself that are not very flattering. But you know, please, I mean, if someone has a memoir out there that makes them look, you know, like their defecation doesn't stink, I think that's not the memoir for me. I mean, that nobody
Yeah.
lives like that, you
But
know?
that is truly the power of this book, is that
Oh,
I felt
thank
like
you.
you just let us in, right, to that moment, and I could
Yeah.
just even now, I'm not lying, I have the goosebumps hearing you talk
Oh.
about it in person because I can just imagine, and for women, for girls in particular, body issues, anorexia, right? For people, you see it. We have all seen it, right?
Yeah.
If we have not lived it. And that question of, do we say something? Do we not say something? Because it means so much more. And I thank you for bringing that to the front, right? And
Oh,
forcing
yeah.
us to question, do we say something when we see our friend, if she's 12, if she's 40, right?
Yeah.
Do we
Yeah, I
say
mean, you
something?
know, having been there, It depends on the situation, of course, but again,
Sure.
sometimes in public, maybe like AWP is maybe not right before you go on stage for a panel is maybe not the moment to say to someone like, your body's
Right.
changed a lot. Are you okay? But
Right.
maybe a letter. I'm a big believer in the handwritten letter. And if you have a friend you're worried about,
Right.
letters allow people to absorb information privately on their own time.
Right.
And then decide, kind of control how and when they're going to respond. So if you are concerned about someone, I mean, I think phone calls are nice too, but the letter is, much better than a text.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So, but of course, you lead us to these dark parts, but then you talk about coming out of the darkness,
Yes.
right? And finding horses, and
Yeah.
there's this hope, which I always love, hope.
Yeah, we need
And
it.
yes, we need it. And you, of course, gravitate to horses. And before I ask you about horses and we talk about them, I want to say there's this one part where you're discussing how you've like 30 seconds at a time without fear,
Mhm.
right? These
Mhm. Yeah,
horses. So
maybe 30 seconds. Yep.
right. So I just want to be clear, we're not talking about, Courtney all of a sudden going from, terrible, a moment that was bad to like, oh,
Yeah, no,
right.
it's not Seabiscuit. Mm-mm.
No, we're talking about like 30 seconds at a time. This is still day by day. And just that honesty was
Yeah.
just very powerful. But
Thank
okay.
you.
So talk to me about horses, how you came to horses.
I would love to talk to you about horses. So there's when I was a little girl, I rode all the time. It was my life's joy. And when my parents split up when I was 9, a lot of stuff in my life and in the book happens when I'm 9, leaving my best friend Kristen, my parents' divorce, and a lot of that had to do with my brother who has a developmental disabilities and really awful heart problems, and he was being hospitalized all the time. When I was 9, he was younger, about 4 years old, and more or less I went to live with my dad, and Brendan, my brother, lived, well, he kind of lived in the hospital. But so a lot of things in my life changed, and it's just my mom wasn't really available to take me to see the horses anymore, and my dad was on Wall Street, so it just sort of stopped. And I was starting to become interested in boys, so it wasn't some great heartache for me. And then as I got older, I became quite determined to make my own path and not follow the model of what I was seeing in 1980s Greenwich, Connecticut, which was, look nice, nab a finance dude and stay in Greenwich and rely
Right.
on his money. And so, I took, I guess, the bohemian path,
But you
and
left horses for a long
I
time.
left horses. Yeah. And,
And
and
then
it was 30 years later, when I'm 38 years old and just completely coming undone. I was at a birthday party for these toddlers, and no one tells you when you're pregnant that you're going to have to spend so many years going to like awful children's birthday parties. And I was sitting there,
I hated
I
them,
mean,
by
like
the way.
severely depressed. And these little toddlers are whacking a piñata, a little donkey with a baseball bat, and it's spilling its innards everywhere. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, I want out of this is not how I want to spend my one and precious Saturday. And this man came in, who I might never met. And he said, oh, hello, I can't hug you. And, in greeting, I just came from the barn, smells so bad. And something in my heart just exploded. And I was like, what barn? Where? Give me the trainer's number. Because I've been trying all these things, like dance classes. I don't know, like I said, acupuncture. I've been trying things to try to get back to joy, and nothing was working. And I took the trainer's number. I went out in the backyard of the birthday
So at this
party, and
point, not only acupuncture, but you've been trying like medications,
yeah,
prescription
it's
drugs,
serious talk
like
therapy, couple
all
therapy. And it was one of those couples therapy
everything.
where we have to repeat what the other person said. I mean, it was all very
Yeah.
painful. I went to clown school. Like, I tried a lot of shit. And, and
This is why I love the memoir, right? Because you
yeah,
just lay it out
I
there like
tried this
that.
stuff. And
Yes.
I set up an appointment with this trainer. And a lot of the chip on my shoulder about writing was that I thought I could never go back to it, because as a freelance writer, I was like, I'll just never be able to afford it. And I don't want to get into a situation where I'm addicted to something that's a financial burden on my family. But I decided, screw it. And and then so I scheduled that kind of comeback riding lesson. And
No,
then
I love that, the
yeah.
comeback riding.
And I haven't stopped since. And I had to do a lot, like kind of a Goldilocks search to find barns and horses and kind of underground ways to ride, because I was on a restricted budget. But yeah, it was like, oh my gosh, this is what I need, actually, is something that's just for me, that has nothing to
Yeah.
do with my kid, nothing to do with my husband. And even the fact that it was a little, that it takes financial resources, oddly helped me, because it stirred me back into go mode. Because I was like, shit, Courtney, if you want to keep riding, you got to get that book in so you can get the next part of your advance. Otherwise, you
Right.
will not be able to ride. And ever since then, it helps me hustle and
Oh,
look
I
for
love that.
freelance work, because I have a horse. So I'm like, I got to meet the board every single month. I don't have
Right.
some annual fixed salary. I got to go out and find the money. And it keeps me involved in the world.
Yeah. And I love also, so you talk about the power of horses physically also.
Yeah.
And so there's this one paragraph that I just want to read. It's from page 62. If any of you have this gorgeous book, here it is. And you write that horseback riding is good for the repairing and strengthening of a person's muscles is indisputable to most who try it. But the uninitiated are slower to recognize how a horse can help the mind. Frequently referred to as stealth therapy, interaction with horses has been known to benefit people who struggle with anxiety, depression, post traumatic stress, and fearfulness because horses mirror human emotions. So I've never been on a horse.
Yeah.
I don't ever been, right? So this was like,
so what does this mean?
What? Yes.
Yeah. So the easiest way is to explain that horses have 3 ear positions, right? And if they're forward and kind of perky, it's like, hello, everything's fine. And if they're in the middle, it's, I'm a little unsure, but I'm not decided whether things are good or bad. And then if they're like this, it's very bad, bad, bad.
Okay.
And whatever energy you're bringing into the proverbial room or stable, they throw right back at you. So when I started riding again, I would walk, they have long aisles and there's little stalls on each side where horses are. And I would literally walk by the horses and they'd pin their ears. That's how much stress and anxiety I was carrying. And when I was on a horse, often they would like bolt, which, for the uninitiated means that they'd run off with me, because I would get on and I'd block my breath from nervousness, raise my shoulders, which pushes you out of the saddle, and be too far forward and just not be breathing, which to a horse, horses are very nervous animals. They're pretty much always in flight mode, would signal panic. There's something to be very frightened of. There's a predator, run away.
Wow.
So your mind that thinks, your anxious, depressed mind that thinks there's a predator, tells the horse that there's a predator, and neither of you can actually see the predator, and it just gets worse and worse. So horses, to this day, have become the most therapeutic aid for me, because if I want to get on one safely or even be around one safely, I have to lower my shoulders, be heavy in my body, be really deliberate with my breathing, slow my heart rate, and my cortisol levels dropped like wildly.
So you can't cheat a horse. You cannot pretend.
They have no idea what irony is. You literally can't lie to a horse. So that was the thing. Like I go to AWP, I see 200 friends, and I can lie to everyone, and they're lying to me. And then I see a horse I've never met in my life, and he's like, "Girl, something's really wrong with you." It's amazing.
Yeah.
They just don't lie. And you like, I could walk into a barn, and if I have bad energy, and my husband's next to me, who doesn't know anything about horses, they'll go up to him and nicker, because he's got a very calm energy. So it can be heartbreaking when you love horses. And so they're very, very helpful for nervous people. And there's incredible results with equine therapy, with vets, especially, and people who have suffered extreme trauma, because talk therapy, I'm all for it. It was very helpful for me. But some people are not going to find the way out through words. They don't want to talk, especially in the military, where often it's sort of raised in an environment where you're not supposed to talk about anything. You're supposed to take commands. And so the idea of sitting on a couch and talking to someone about the military is kind of going against orders, whereas if you interact with this large, beautiful beast, it's not asking anything of you. It's just sort of keeping you company. And People have
Yeah.
certain types
That's
of people
amazing.
have tremendous results with equine therapy.
Amazing. So you take it sort of even to a different level and into polo, right? The
Yeah.
sport, the sport of kings, as it said.
Yeah.
And so I cannot believe how quickly time is running out. I could
I
talk to you for
know.
hours and hours, but I want to make sure we get this in here because what I love about you going into polo is that you admit, right, you're not very talented, right? You're not going to be a great
I've
polo
got a
player.
really good swing.
You got a good swing. Okay. But right, women have so much pressure to do everything perfectly. And people in general, right? This is to
Yeah.
do something because you're good at it. But you say, actually, why don't I play polo? Because I'm terrible and I just love it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I love that, right, message. So please talk to me about how you came to that.
I was telling my agent, I'm like, I think I wrote an sports memoir. I'm like the bumbling hero that doesn't necessarily get better. I mean, I get better, but I mean, to me, there's just like, I'll always be proud of myself that I keep doing this thing that like, I'm not going to become pro. I'm still scared. But I just love it. And there's reasons that make sense to me why I love it. But, from the outset, it's probably like, why doesn't this girl give up? She keeps falling off. But it was the only area in my life where everything else, at our age, especially, and in America, when you're good at something, you have to become an influencer, you have to become an expert, you have to become a brand ambassador. And I just love now, like, I'm all about, I go to like my daughter's talent shows and I see people and they're dancing on stage and, they don't have that thing that, they don't have that God-given talent, but they have the passion. And I'm more excited for them than like anyone else because, that's joy and it's going to remain. Sometimes if you're just passionate about something, but not truly talented, then you get to keep this beautiful, pure relationship with it. Whereas, for both of us and other writers listening, the funny thing about having a talent at writing is when it becomes your career, like I said at the outset, your relationship to the writing itself changes. You start to think about marketing and sales, and that's a privilege. Someone wants to publish your book. This is a huge privilege. But once you have a book, you're always going to be thinking about, will I have another book? Will the book fail? That will really never go away. Whereas
with polo,
I'm like, well, I never have to worry about whether or not someone will hire me for the Florida season because they're not going to. So
I know. I love
but
that.
I can warm the horse up for somebody else.
I love that. So I actually took up accordion a few years ago.
I love that,
And
Rachel.
I truly am terrible. Like and people think that I'm exaggerating, but I am not. And I love it so much.
That is
So when I read
great.
that that you felt that way about polo, I was like, more people need to talk about that. You
I
can
know we
truly
need
be
a
terrible and
band.
love
What is
it.
it? The Sisterhood of the Clumsy Pants or something. I don't know. We'll have to come up with a name and just start a revolution. I love it.
Right. Just do something for pure joy, even if you're terrible. And that is okay to be terrible.
Unless it involves like driving, something, don't hurt other people with your terribleness. Like I'm not a fast polo player, but I'm very safe. And like, I'm not gonna, because I do play with some people that are a menace to society. Like it's important to be safe, whatever you're doing. If
I'm not going to hurt anyone.
Fine, but
I'm not going to hurt anyone. It's just their ears. Okay. So we only have a minute and a half left. And all of my listeners love my last question. So I have to ask you, you have written an entire book of advice on how to publish, but what is the advice that you would give someone in 1 minute for, a new writer, maybe they're doing memoir or fiction?
Okay. My advice is if you're dead set on the traditional publishing path, agent and book deal, I'm sorry, I just saw a weird message.
Sorry.
Expand your thinking a little bit. This is such a competitive time in publishing right now. Like it is not for the faint of heart. And we are so gifted. I mean, this is the silver lining of digital media. We have all these avenues, all these ways to get our stories out. YouTube channel, IGTV, a newsletter, a podcast, dance routines on TikTok. So start thinking about what channels actually bring you joy. And if it's performing in the street, maybe start a one-woman show instead of trying to get your essay collection published. Think out of the box because the gatekeepers are going to tell you nobody's taking memoir, nobody's doing it. And they're not always right. And you might have to forge your own path. And the traditional book deal, it's awesome. It is extreme privilege and fortune, but it is really hard. It's really hard and it doesn't always come with joy. So maybe take the reins and create your own success story. That would be my advice.
Courtney, I love that. And I advise everybody to listen closely and buy all of her books, in
Thank you.
particular, The Year of the Horses.
Thank you
Courtney,
so
thank
much,
you.
Rachel.
So much fun. I always love seeing you, hopefully in real life
Ditto.
soon.
Yeah.
All right. May you sell many, many copies.
Inshallah.